is this working? You know, the idea of getting to a place where it's just a breeze.
Yeah.
I haven't found it. And
it's not a good place to be. I mean, that's what I found. It's like when you get too much praise, right? When you get too comfortable, that's usually when things start declining, you know, on your personal stock market of ideas, right? And quality, you know, like when you get too comfortable and you think too highly of yourself, you know, that creeps up on you. You don't really even realize that, you know, but then like your work starts declining and you don't realize that, but everybody else does.
Shit's about to go down. I'm feeling something in my spirit.
Chats and Tatts with Aaron, Della, Vedova.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Chats and Tatts with me, your host, Aaron Della Vedova. Today's guest, I've been super pumped about this. So I learned of his work probably 10 years ago or so. He's a tattoo artist. And I was like, wow, I have not seen anyone take BioMech, which is it's a type of art and tattooing. It sort of stems from the Alien series, and it's a organic. It's hard to explain, but it was really Guer Atchison that got it going, and then Aaron Kane. It's got a very specific style. But when I met this man's work or saw this man's work, he brought a voice to it that I had never really seen before, and I was like, that is incredible. So I just been a fan for 10 years and always wanted to get tattooed by him. He's going to tattoo me on the show today. So without further ado, please welcome my new friend, Marcus Lenhard.
Thank you, Aaron.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's really lovely.
Yeah,
Making me blush right from the beginning.
Well, and I was screwing up on the name there, H.R. Geiger. I was missing that. And I was funny. I want to bring this up actually, because I was just in Switzerland and visiting my brother-in-law's fiance, and she was going to take us around, show us things. And she took us to the Guer Castle. Mm-hmm. You know this place?
Yeah. Guer.
Guer. I knew I was saying Guer. Yeah. And that's where his museum is. Uh-huh. I had no idea. I go to this castle just thinking I'm going to do a castle tour. Yeah. And then lo and behold, there's the H.R. Geiger restaurant, bar, museum. It was so dope.
It's a cool place. Yeah. I have yet to go there. I haven't been there yet. I was
going to ask you that because that's sort of like, is that true to say like BioMech? Okay. Mm-hmm. It stems from H.R. Geiger. Isn't he the seed?
He's the seed. And I love that you use that word too. I think a seed, because everything kind of grows from a seed, you have that organic growth. Mm-hmm. And I think like this whole, I don't know if you even can call it a movement, but this whole genre of tattooing, especially, I think it's mostly alive in tattooing and also very much in like concept art where you have like background artists that like paint backgrounds for science fiction movies or computer games or invent creatures for that kind of stuff or anything to do with it. They really love that kind of art, right? Because it's so abstract. It's a really cool, how would you call it? Like,
to me, it's like a fusion of nature and animal. When I say animal, could be human, could be anything that's animated.
It's an analogy. That's the word I was looking for.
Okay.
So I think, BioMech, I don't always like the word BioMech. That was coined by Geiger. I don't always like it because I don't know if it really encompasses perfectly what this is all about anymore. But I think in tattooing, it's actually really big because it's a really good analogy for how nature solves problems, right? Evolution and how things move in nature, physics, biology. There's certain math. There's a certain golden ratio that if you understand it, people can tell. And before we started rolling, we talked a little bit about Japanese culture and how they found this very unique way to find this ratio of aesthetics in almost anything that they do. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt very pulled towards that, even before I started tattooing, even before I really started to think about BioMech as BioMech. But yeah, like for me personally, it definitely comes from Geiger. It definitely started right there when I was a kid, and I was immediately fascinated by it. I think it's a cool thing. I think in tattooing, probably it hasn't gotten as much attention as I think it should, but we can talk about why that maybe is or why not.
Well, I mean, what you said is so true. I mean, when Geiger, I always say Geiger, I don't know.
Mhm.
When Geiger invented that, style of art, that genre of art, I mean, that's the first unique thing to me is how few times in history somebody emits a brand new thing.
Mhm.
It's usually you see art, it's like, oh, that's a little bit like that thing I already saw before.
Yeah.
And that guy did a new version of it. But he, unless I'm wrong, and I might be, I'm sure your viewers will let me know if I am, to my knowledge, he just made the Alien movies and he was doing the work before that. And it was like a brand new style of art that the world had never seen before. And I mean, respect to anyone that can do that.
Yeah.
That's like tapping straight into the source. When you can
Yeah.
be creative without reference to anything before that, that's
Mhm.
amazing. And then you're right, the tattoo industry just latched onto it. I don't know, and you might know more because this is your line of work. This is your genre of work.
Mhm.
I want to say it was Guy Atchison that was well, I guess you would have to say Aaron Kane. I don't know which of those two guys. Do you know who really
No,
was
I
the
don't.
first? You don't.
No, I don't know who did it first. I just know that those two guys have been so prolific in bringing this
Mhm.
genre to tattooing.
Yes.
I don't know who takes the pioneer's cake of both of
Right,
those,
right.
but I would say both of them because both of their approach to BioMech is so different,
Yeah.
right? Where Aaron's stuff is like
sharp
and like very graphic and like very bold and super readable from very far away. Almost an old school approach to the BioMech thing. Always reminded me a little bit of like comic book art
Mhm.
back in the day. Felt super drawn to it because everything is about shapes.
Mhm.
And everything is about just the shape language that he had that was so unique. And then he made tattoo machines in that style.
Right. I remember those.
And I'm so grateful for him doing that because I think that's probably like the most important way that BioMech keeps having a place in tattooing with people that don't necessarily like BioMech, but here they are tattooing with one of the best machines that you can get. And it's a BioMech looking machine.
Right.
And he kind of like keeps BioMech cool amongst people who might not necessarily think that it's the coolest thing in the world, right? So I think that bridging that gap, like he definitely has a huge hand in that, and probably more so because of the craftsmanship of his machines that he's doing than his tattoos, because he hasn't been really tattooing for a really long time now. I think he has probably stopped around 10 years ago, and why, I don't know. I have never really talked to him about it. I only had a very short encounter with him about that time ago, like around 10 years ago. But man, his machines, my wife has a bunch of his machines and they're just so perfect when it comes to that. And I referenced a lot of my shapes, with his shapes. That was really important for me. And Guy Atchison is almost like my BioMech father, like my BioMech daddy a little bit, right? I mean, he's just one of the most approachable, no ego kind of people I know in tattooing, one of the most intelligent and forthcoming people.
He is.
I don't think I could have made it to where I am right now without him. There's no question about that.
Well, I guess, the impact of their work on the tattoo community has been massive, and even for guys like me that don't do BioMech, but, it changed my career completely because before really getting to know their work, tattoos to me were pictures. They were a thing that you put on a body. And then I start looking at these guys' stuff and it's like, no, they're decorating the body.
Yeah.
They're moving, the shapes that they're tattooing move with the muscles on the arm, move with the shape of the human form. And that clicked for me. And for me, it became more filigree, and some of my Japanese work, I use wind and water. And of course, they're doing the same thing when you really look at that golden ratio, as you mentioned. When you look at a really cool piece of BioMech and you look at really cool finger waves, you can find that same pattern in both of those
Absolutely.
things. And that to me is huge. That's great tattoos, especially large format tattoos, all have that going on. It's just what are you using to create it? In your case, it's BioMech or organic shapes. And other people, it's wind and water from the Japanese era, and or filigree. Like I use a lot of filigree, but that was a really impactful thing for me.
For me too. And for me, it was exactly the other way around. My BioMech and my movements and my forms, they all sucked until I understood how Japanese water waves or finger waves actually worked. Because I didn't really want to draw them, because I didn't really want to do it. I wanted to do BioMech. I wanted to do nothing but BioMech. Wasn't really interested in anything else. When I was just starting out to tattoo, I was 23, 24, super arrogant. I thought I know better about pretty much anything. And when you go into tattooing with that kind of attitude, not having a mentor, not really being in a tattoo shop, right? Like everything I did was completely self-taught. I went into it kind of jaded and kind of arrogantly. And then I fell on my face really hard when I realized that, oh my God, like I'm not good at this, right? And then I was like, you know what? I'm doing tattooing, and this is about like 3 or 4 years into my career. I'm tattooing, I'm making good money. This is still my dream job. This is what I wanted to do. And I'm not going to complain. I'm just going to do what sells. I don't have to do BioMech. If I don't get to live my absolute dream, who am I? This humbled me. And I was like, who am I to expect that I'm going to do exactly what I want to do, that I'm going to be that bio guy? And so I stopped doing BioMech and started to get into more Japanese work, and then started to draw a lot, finger waves and scales and feathers and snakes and elements, really, especially, right? You have to learn how to draw these elements, wind, water, fire, and like solids, right? Like rocks and earth and sand and all that kind of stuff. And that's really when that penny dropped for me, right? And then I did that for a while and was really frustrated with especially water for a while, because I couldn't make it look good. And it looked so easy. And then it's so hard to do. And then at some point after doing it for a while, almost like a year, I think, the penny dropped, and I actually had to really put some work into it. And I learned how to work towards a goal really hard, right? And then I was like, all right, okay. And somebody came in and wanted a BioMech tattoo. And I was like, okay, fuck, all right. And then I drew it like 5 o'clock in the morning, last minute. I've been sweating it for days and then not doing it and procrastinating. And then the guy comes in 10 o'clock and I go to work at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I made this sleeve that just looked like nothing I've ever done, because I drew it like elements. I drew it not as like a BioMech, right? Words can be so deceiving. Like as soon as you stop thinking about that, I just drew like elements, basically. I just made things flow really nicely.
Shapes.
Yeah. Shapes, and made it about like the shapes have to look good, because that's how tribal works, for example, right? Tribal doesn't explain itself. It's just black shapes, and people just accept it wholesale. They're just like, yep, that looks cool. They don't ask what it is.
Or what it means.
And all that kind of stuff. It just looks good. That's all it has to do. And I was like, why is it that I always have to explain BioMech? And you can't really explain it, It's like if somebody comes up with that question, like, hey, what's this? You're like, oh God.
I mean, the way I would explain it, and you're right, it's a difficult thing to explain, but I think there's 2 approaches to tattooing. Well, not 2, but there's several. But your approach in BioMech in general is the idea of just decorating the human form without symbolism, without subject matter.
Yes.
And not to say that the other stuff isn't as relevant or isn't as important or isn't as valuable, but those are 2 different things. You've got the person who wants the snake or the dragon or the skull, and usually there's a reason for it. I want the snake because it represents this. I want the skull of this. Yeah. Even if it doesn't have meaning, it's still imagery they want on them for whatever reason. And then you've got other, especially nowadays, because we'll get into this in a second, but other people who just want to decorate their body.
Yep.
They just want to take their body and make it decorative, almost like you would paint a custom car or something. I often use that term a lot, or that comparison. Like, if you had a car and you were going to give it a custom paint job, would you put you could put snakes and dragons and all these imagery on it, or you could just paint pinstriping down the side that sleekly moves down the side of the vehicle and spins out on the back of the car. And
That's a really good point.
And I think those are the two differences with those two genres of art. You know, you're decorating, and it is probably nowadays. I doubt you get challenged as much, but back when that first started, there was a lot of pushback from people who were just looking at that like, well, screw that, it looks cool. What is it? What does it mean? And if you couldn't really explain that to them, they devalued it, you know, because it didn't have a meaning. Instead of just saying, wow, look how pretty that is.
Yeah, I think with Aaron's stuff, right? That was never in question. Right? Like Aaron's, because it's so much about shape and so much about like really bold colors, like really celebrating color and celebrating shape, just like in a tribal. But that penny didn't drop for me for a very long time until I actually kind of started to pull it off myself, where I was like, what the hell did I just do? Like I just made something really cool, I think, you know, as much as you get to say that about your own stuff, but I surprised myself. And those are good moments, right? When you're tattooing and you're making something, especially if it's last minute and you're scrambling and all of a sudden, you know, like you do something where you really surprise yourself and you're like, okay, why is this good? Right? Why is this good now? And then I think years later, when I actually started talking about this stuff to people who understand it better, and then I had to explain it a little bit, that's when I really understood, okay, this was good because I did something different. And, you know, guys' tattoos, they blew my mind because I didn't know that tattoos could be like that back then, right? Like I didn't know that
None of us did.
Any of that stuff is allowed. That's allowed. That much detail, that much color, like that much, like, I don't know, like attention to detail, like how much patience does this person have? Like I didn't know that any of that was allowed. And I really was like, okay, I want to do this. But then once I understood that what Aaron brings to the table about shape and shape language, almost in a graffiti kind of style, where also nobody questions it, right? Nobody can necessarily read what somebody is writing. It's super abstract. It's all about shapes and colors. Nobody is like, what is that? No, everybody's just like, this is a really cool piece, right? So I was like, all right, if I can take some of this and I can take some of this, like everything that I like about Guy's stuff and everything that I like about Aaron's stuff, and kind of like pick between those two and take everything that I learned from drawing elements in that Japanese kind of way. Maybe I can like bring this into something that is a little bit more authentic for my own stuff. And I've been doing that kind of stuff that ever since, and keep pushing it that way. And then every now and then you try to introduce something different, but I always go back and resort back to that kind of work because it's what works. It's really foundational.
It is. And you know, you're also explaining the shift between being a tattoo artist and being an artist who tattoos. Because there was a time where tattoo artists were tattoo artists, meaning you're like a barber. You went into work and people came and they picked it off the wall, or they told you what they wanted, and you, whatever it was that day, you did it. Just like a barber. I want my hair this way. Sure. And you do it that way. Yeah.
We used to say tattooer and tattoo artist back then, I think.
Right. We had the two different words.
We had the two different words, and everybody was super proud about it.
But this is at a time where it was first happening. So what I guess I'm getting at is Aaron's work and Guy's work to me also represented, so you can just put your art on people. Like you could go in your garage and paint stuff until you thought it looked cool and then tattoo it on people. Yeah. And I had that was a click moment for me too. I'm like, I'm doing this all wrong. I'm just trying to be of service to everyone who walks through that door every day, which is great. And I still try to be as of service as I can to every client I work with. And I do a lot more illustration work. So usually my jobs start with just give me some subject matter and give me a body part and let me go from there. But yeah, you guys were just bringing straight up abstract art is a simple way to put it, and putting it on human skin. And nowadays, it's crazy when you see all the Blackwork that's happening. And it seems to be, I would almost want to say, the most cutting edge place in tattooing right now is decorative. I call it just decorative tattooing. No subject matter at all.
Yeah.
Or maybe one flower and then it's just huge black shapes behind it that move down from a guy's shoulders to his ankles.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that.
I am too.
I am really excited about that because there's not really many styles that work as a bodysuit, right? There's Japanese tattooing that works as a bodysuit, and only because there's so much elemental elements in it, because it flows so well, right? And you can wear it like a piece of clothing. But it's not as transformative as, for example, like massive amounts of blackwork are. And like blackwork is almost like, it doesn't really tell you a story. It's almost like music without lyrics, right? It's just like a
good analogy.
Yeah. So it doesn't tell you what it's about. You just have, but you can still enjoy music without lyrics, without singing, because if it just flows and it sounds good, you don't question it, right? It's good. It's nice. And then you have BioMech, which is kind of in between those two, where it's very transformative. There's a huge potential to really like turn a limb, like an arm or a leg, into something completely different than what it is, to have like a 3-dimensional illusion in there where things start looking differently. Or you do the same that you do with tribal, where it just looks really cool, and people are really exploring a lot of that stuff differently now because of the amount of blackwork that is out there now, where you just have like, okay, I'm going to make like this arm into like a big black shape. And it's just there's just a couple of lines that just hug the anatomy in just such a way that it looks beautiful. Yeah. And I think that's one of the ways that women actually got very attracted to this kind of large scale ornamental work, where
it's so true. Yeah. So many more women getting large scale.
Because I tattoo almost none. Because BioMech doesn't seem to like hit that spot, right? But this large scale black
red a little too. BioMech seems to feel a little aggressive and masculine, especially Aaron Kane style and Guy's style. Your stuff, I think, is a little more gentle. It's a little more fluid. It's more liquidy, like it's melting a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's interesting to hear that even with your style being a little softer, it's still mostly men.
I've talked to my wife, Kaya, about this quite a bit because she actually tattoos more women, and she also does BioMech, in a very accomplished way. But we talk about this a lot. It's like, why is it that your stuff appeals to women more? And she's like, well, I make it more floral and I make it more into something that is like recognizable as something specific. I think women don't want to be in a position where they have to explain their choices. I think men don't have really a big problem with that.
That's a good point.
I don't think women like to be in a position where somebody looks at them with a question mark, or like questions their choices about how or what they put on their body. As far as that is for me to say, but I've asked a lot of women about that kind of stuff, right? So I talked to women about that stuff. And I was always like, this is really interesting, like when it comes to the way that we make choices about who we want to be to the outside world, like the kind of first impression that we want to make, men make very different decisions than women, right? Because I think like in the end of the day, what we do with our bodies and with our clothing choice as men, it almost doesn't matter as much. Right? Because if we are funny or a nice guy, if we bring something else to the table, we can be small and ugly, and we get away with it. And I think in our culture, Western culture, that might not be true in the same way for women. And so I think that they feel compelled to make decisions a little bit differently there.
Interesting point.
Yeah. No. And I just find it super interesting in a cultural kind of sense.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you try to see what you can take away from that for your own art. So I'm looking very closely at Blackwork, of course, right? And see like, okay, so they make different choices when it comes to flow than I have learned from people like Guy or Aaron, where things can get very convoluted, right? But there it's like so straight and so simple that I'm like, why not keep it a little bit more simple? That's actually really quite beautiful. And then I still appeal more to the masculine side of our clientele. And I'm happy there too. It's like, I don't necessarily need to change that. But it's just an interesting thought experiment, you know?
It is. You know, you've got me thinking about something I've never even contemplated before, because I have everything you're saying. I've totally noticed, and I have mainly my career has been mostly men, probably 80%, and I've often asked myself that question too. And you know, we had I don't know if you're familiar with Phibbs.
I've never met him.
But you know his work.
Absolutely.
He worked here with us for a couple years.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I couldn't believe, like I was, when he tattoos probably 90% women and huge bodysuit type work.
He's one of the people that I think about when I say all these things.
Right. And I'm just, and you're helping me a little now, because I look at his work and I'm like, what is he doing that women seem to be extremely attracted to?
Yeah.
Well, and it's a lot of things, but another thing about flow is how a piece fits on a man's body and how it fits on a woman's body is different. You know, they are, a lot of times he'll accent, you know, the hips to waist ratio, and he'll come under the breasts of the woman. And, you know, he'll put shapes in places that I think wouldn't look great on a man, right? You know, these bodysuits where it's almost like a garter. Yeah. Like, you know, no man's going to want to wear that. It looks like
careful there.
Well, good point. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Most, you know, heterosexual men don't want to wear a Blackwork piece that looks like it's framing their breasts and their hips, accenting their thighs. And, you know, and he is one of many who's learned that special recipe. Yeah. And when he does those pieces, it's beautiful. It really, and I think a lot of times women, on the cultural thing, women want to be, and this is generalizing people, so be gentle here. We're just generalizing, but want to be, they're looking for something sexy, something pretty. Whereas men, a lot of times, I think are just looking for something, for lack of a better term, badass. Yeah. Right. So those are two different ways.
This is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, right? When I said like women make different choices there. And obviously we have to generalize. Otherwise we can't have this conversation at all.
True.
Right. But most men don't worry about how their tattoos are going to look like in an evening dress or a wedding dress.
Right.
Right.
What's going to show when they wear a crop top.
Yeah, exactly. Know? Because the range of clothing for women is like 100% broader than what men have, you know, or want to wear. Like, do we even care? Like, it's kind of the coolest thing in the world if you don't, as a guy, you know. It's like if I go down the street with like a pink dyed pug and I don't give a shit, that's kind of the coolest thing in the world. Right. That's being a real man for some. Or some other guys are like, there's no fucking way, it has to be a pit bull, like with a widest, most like, you know, bespiked
throat piece.
Yeah, exactly. Or like some people like tattoo their pit bulls or something. I don't know.
Well, it's cool to see. And one thing I used to think that women just didn't want big work. And what I'm seeing in this Blackwork movement and other people in that space, there's so many women out there who would love to have a bodysuit.
If they can wear it like a garment, that doesn't interfere with what they're wearing on top of it, from sexy underwear, from bikinis, from bathing suits of any make, or like any kind of clothing that they can wear. If it doesn't interfere with their clothing choices or fashion choices or makeup choices, which it makes sense that it is Blackwork, because it doesn't, you know, limit you in the kinds of colors that you actually can wear.
So true.
You know? So all of that makes a lot of sense. That doesn't necessarily mean that is why any individual person makes these choices. You know, it can just be like, I liked it. I really like what that looked like. I haven't thought about it much more. I just wanted it. And honestly, as a tattooer, that's my favorite thing, obviously, right? Because then people come to me and they just liked something and they're a bit more open to ideas and we can talk about it. And I actually like to take a lot of time with my clients, figuring out who they are a little bit before we do something and even start something. Because when you have to go back to that music analogy, when you're listening to a song that doesn't necessarily have any lyrics in it, that can be even more personal than something that is very specific, right? So if I come across this super gentle person who's just, you know, the most softly spoken guy, you know, like very self-secure, but very, very gentle, humble and stuff, I don't necessarily need to put like horrific spikes all over him, that make him look like a super badass. He doesn't need that, right? I can do something that is really fluid and just beautiful and just like, is exactly made for his body shape. And it makes him look good, but doesn't make him look anything but what he actually is, right? And so I do find it a little bit important to spend some time with my clients, just, making the piece come together.
I could not agree more. Yeah. I do the same thing with my clients. I get to know them a little bit. I get, you get to know their soul, their character. And it subconsciously informs you as you create the piece, and that's cool that you do that. It's that's one of the things I love about this show I'm doing is really highlighting how personal it really is. Yeah. And the artists out there that are recognizing that and really trying to come up with art that's going to reveal the soul of that human being, and it's not just, oh, you like BioMech. What do you want, a sleeve? And you just draw whatever it's turning you on that day. You change it a little depending on who you're working with. Yeah,
I do. There's I have a couple of different approaches, where a little bit more aggressive, darker, brighter. I love working in black and gray or just like shades of black, really dark. That's beautiful because that's something where I'm like, how can I tap into that Blackwork genre a little bit more, because I feel like, why not, right? Because that's exciting to me. But there's definitely a part where I'm just like trying to just have like a gauge of the person that I'm tattooing for sure. And, I'm sure this too. There's people like once you've done this for 20 years, in your case, I think it's 30 almost, right? Yeah. So there's people who come to you because they want a piece from you. Yeah. And they almost don't care what you do. They just come to you with like this trust and they just say like, I'll just do whatever. That's not my favorite thing in the world. I do like to have like a little bit of direction.
Me too.
Because
for that reason, because I feel like if they don't give me a little direction, if I don't get to know them a little bit, I'm not going to be successful expressing them properly.
I can't make you your favorite sandwich if we have never talked about what you actually like, right?
Right.
And so that's really important to me. So usually I start and I spend like the first sessions, I usually do a lot of sleeves. I do a lot of sleeves and I love doing that. I don't need to change that at all. And we start doing like 4 or 5 days. We spend 4 or 5 days with each other, which costs me a bunch of money in the end of the day because I could be tattooing 5 people in that same amount of time.
Let me get this straight. So you have a new client. He wants to get a sleeve. Right. You guys will just hang out and get to know each other for 4 to 5 days?
No. Well, yes, but we also do work in that time.
Oh, you're saying you do 4 to 5 day sessions back to back?
Yeah.
Really?
So we don't tattoo for 5 days. Usually we get to hang out, meet each other, just like we did this morning, right? Like just to like gauge each other's energy a little bit, see who he is, break the ice. Usually I pick people up from the airport or from the ferry terminal or wherever they arrive and pick them up, bring them to the shop or bring them to their Airbnb or hotel. And then in the car, it's actually really easy to just break the ice because you don't have to have that eye contact necessarily, right? So it's easier to talk to each other. It's not so weird. And then we just start like looking through reference material. I ask people which pieces of mine they really liked, which ones they didn't like. That's also really important.
Yeah, that's helpful.
And then we start drawing. I usually do, nowadays, I do mostly everything freehand. And we can spend 2 days just drawing.
Now, are you drawing on paper and you're drawing on him
directly
and
on
he's looking in the mirror and you're wiping it off and changing and this is a whole process leading up to the point
and
where
it's a struggle every time. I struggle every time. Yeah, I struggle with that stuff every time and I like it that way nowadays, right? Like I get like sweaty palms a little bit, like I got these little beads of sweat on my nose and it's like, okay, right. So now I have to make this thing that, because I hate the idea of like having peaked out already. Right. And so I'm
getting too comfortable.
Yeah. I don't want to be comfortable. Right. And so I'm like, okay, like this is on the spot. This is this new person that I just met. And I want to do something that blows both of us away. Right. Ideally. Right. And then we start and we draw just Sharpies and we do that usually for like 2 days. Sometimes I have something that just clicks immediately in one day. And then we start tattooing it the next day. And then usually we tattoo because most of my clients travel now, and then we tattoo for 2 or 3 days and just spend 2 or 3 days just putting all the blacks and just all the foundational stuff. Let that heal, and then we have a really nice foundation to put color in a way that heals well, that ages well. I feel like if you try and do everything at once, sometimes you have like diminishing returns a little bit, depending on everybody's skin.
Leave a little to adjust on the next session.
Yeah,
I get that.
exactly. Right. And so I don't want to overtax the skin too much on these kinds.
How many hours, just real quick, how many hour sessions do you usually sit with people?
Usually like 4 or 5 hours nowadays.
Yeah. That's my number too.
Yeah. Because I think if you do this for like, I think after having done it for 10 years, I felt it. Right. Like
it seems to be the sweet spot.
Yeah. That's when your body is kind of like, okay, buddy.
Yeah.
Something's got to change here, eh?
Well, they start getting tired. You start getting tired. I mean, obviously, we've all been in a position where it's the last day of a sleeve and the guy's flying out that night and you find yourself in an 8 or 9 hour session, which I absolutely hate when that happens to me. They kill me.
I can't do it anymore.
I haven't done one in a long time. I
haven't done one in a long time. I might be able to do it. I just need something that just keeps my attention span kind of like scaffolded in one direction for long enough, right? So there's a couple of tricks that I've developed over the years to just like get through these really long sessions, because that's the other side of this, right? If you hang out with somebody you've never met for 5 days, at some point you've had enough of each other. You can't talk to each other anymore. At some point you're just like, okay, I'm socialed out. Not because I don't like the person or whatever, but just because like this is an intense way of doing this. It's like, and so what usually ends up happening at some point, once we start tattooing, I just make sure everybody's comfortable, and they find their groove, and they're really happy with like their ergonomics, the way that they sit, and they're warm and happy, and they have enough things to keep them busy, and they're in the right spot to get tattooed for a couple of hours. And then I put some headphones on, run an audiobook or a podcast, and then I can be in that spot for hours, just like reading my favorite book, tattooing, and basically being on autopilot at that point, because all the design aspects are out of the way, and
just mechanical almost at that point.
Yeah. And it's nice because then I feel like I make better art that way, because then it keeps me in a place where I don't overthink things, which I tend to do. And yeah, that's the way that I do it now, and I'm really comfortable with it. That sounds nice. Perfect way for me to make this happen. But like having the same person for 5 days definitely is not the most lucrative way to do it. So, but for me, the best way to make the things that I make look really good. That's how I get to the results that I'm having. And if that costs me money, at the end of the day, I'm okay with that. That's totally fine.
Respect, dude. That's as you said, I've been doing this 30 years. I own 2 large shops. I don't even know how many tattooers have worked with me over the years.
Right.
Over 100, probably over 200. So I've seen the process of so many tattoo artists. And that's the first time I've heard that particular process. That sounds I like the sound of that. And yet that sounds really intimate, really personal, and really caring and nurturing to the client. Not just how you make them comfortable and make sure they're warm and all the things you said, but you're basically building trust in that time frame, right? Yeah. They're seeing in those lead up to starting that tattoo, like this guy is literally trying to do the best tattoo of his career on me today.
Yeah.
He is not fucking around. He's just, been with me 2 days, just drawing.
Yeah.
What an amazing message without words that you're sending to those
Thank you.
people.
That's really kind of you to say. I think Dave Koenig said it when you guys had your interview with each other, that we're making memories here. Or you said it, I think, in that podcast. You put a memory on somebody, right? When you get this tattoo and you have like this whole event, you make like such an important. It's like a fork in the road for some people, right? Especially when you get like big work, that can be life changing. Like you have like a 24-year-old guy coming to you with like maybe some self-esteem issues, and he gets his first tattoo and he wants the sleeve and he wants it to look good. I mean, in that moment, you become a really important person to that guy, especially if you spend 5 days in a row with them and then see that whole sleeve through. Like I've seen it many times that it really changes people. And I feel that I have to take that responsibility really, really serious.
True.
So when I do this, because you and I both have gotten tattoos from people who we could tell were not stoked to tattoo us, or who are not stoked on tattooing,
or just
period.
not stoked on their personal life
Yeah,
and what's
or
going on
whatever
for
it is.
them personally.
But then you
and they're
take
bringing that
home.
energy to you.
Yeah. And then you take that back, and then you carry that around with you, and you're never 100% stoked on what you, on the experience that you've just gotten. I can't do that to anybody. I don't want to. I just like the way that tattoo looks for others that will see that person and the memory that person made with me, that's equally important to me. And so if I have to tattoo less people throughout my career to keep that true, then that's 100% what I'm willing to do. I also, of course, have to make a living with it and all of that kind of stuff, right? But I think, bottom line, if things look great and everybody's happy and everybody has a good experience, that's the most important thing. Doesn't always happen. Some people, they just rub you the wrong way. That's always going to be a thing. But I'm also always saying, like, you know what, like, if you don't want to do this with me, it's always an option. We don't have to do this, right? Like, I have a couple of like safety mechanisms in place where I don't lose a week of work, so there's always a way to make that happen. But I can look in the mirror in the end of the day and feel pretty good about the stuff that I've done so far. So that's nice.
That's music to my ears, man.
Awesome.
I just, you're really highlighting my what I've been saying my whole career.
Nice.
And you actually trumped me a little. Like I don't tattoo as much as I used to. I mean, I'm averaging a couple days a week. Then I do one of these shows, and that's just a 30-year tattooer. That's where I'm at. But back in the day when I was working, 5 days a week, 4 days a week, I gave them that level of attention. I take my drawings home. I pre-create the art. I make sure they view it, make sure they like it. I make the adjustments happily almost always, unless they're counterproductive, which can occur. But this whole process you're doing to spend that much time and your art too is so organic that I can't imagine it looking the way it looks without hand drawing it on to the body. I just think there's so much information that you're taking in from that physical form you're dealing with that day.
Absolutely.
My stuff's a little different because people are getting snakes and dragons. And so I do come with a snake, at least the head of it and part of its body, because to Sharpie that on, it's just, my God.
No, I wouldn't do that either.
Right.
No.
And you do illustrations. I shouldn't keep cornering in you just your organic stuff.
I corner myself into that a little bit, don't I? I mean,
but what I'm saying is I think for your style of work, this is a fantastic way to get that done.
It's my favorite thing to do at the moment, and partly it's I pushed myself into it a little bit myself, and partly it has been like my recent circumstances have pushed me a little bit more towards the freehand approach. I used to probably be one of the first people who did solely digital work and like got rid of paper completely about like 10, 15 years ago. I started working just with Photoshop. I had a big Wacom tablet, and just did everything digitally because I was so freaking impatient with myself, being like, okay, like this whole drawing thing doesn't work for me. I need to be able to second guess myself a little bit more, right? So for the same reasons, right, that we just talked about, I was like, all right, we need to be really, I need to be able to do this faster. And then I brought clients into the shop while I was doing the digital work on their tattoo so that they can be there and see the whole process of it coming to life. And most people really love that. And so it was the same approach back then. So I've been doing this approach with having people there for like 4 or 5 days continuously for probably 12 years now. And partly also, in all honesty, because that's how I get myself to work, right? If there's somebody breathing down my neck, I can't get like into a place where I can procrastinate and just,
Can't
like,
get your iPhone out and start looking at Instagram.
Exactly. Right. Like, because I do tend to do that. I have mad ADHD.
Oh,
right.
okay.
And so I'm like, if there's somebody there, it becomes a more performative thing. And I feel very comfortable in that performative kind of space where like somebody's looking over my shoulder. This has to be good. It keeps me kind of real. And so I bring people out. Back then, I brought people out to just like be there to scaffold my attention span a little bit. And now I've done it for so long that I can just be there. But because I moved recently to Canada.
That's right. You moved from Germany.
I moved from Germany. Yeah.
You're originally born, raised,
Yeah.
grew up in Germany.
Right.
And now you're in Victoria Island, Canada.
Yeah. Vancouver Island.
Vancouver, sorry.
Yeah. Vancouver
Victoria
Island
is the city on Vancouver Island.
right. That's
that
the
makes
capital of British
Right.
Columbia.
Yep.
I moved there really recently with my lovely wife, Kaya, and we recently got married just 10 days ago, I think.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, this is our little mini honeymoon here in San Diego right now.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Which is a really good place to be for a honeymoon, eh?
Yeah, it's a good
So,
town.
mhm.
A little different than the weather you're getting up there right
Yeah.
now.
But because I'm here now and I couldn't bring all my stuff with me, everything was in a sea can, coming over from Europe to Canada. And it took forever for that container to arrive. Just recently arrived. So I didn't have my computer. I didn't have my Wacom tablet. I didn't have any of my stuff. I hate working on an iPad because I'm an old fart now who doesn't like new things. Right. So I can't really work on an iPad because,
You got used to the Wacom
yeah,
tablet.
I got used to that whole cockpit that I built for myself. Right. So I didn't have any of that stuff. And I was like, right, I still want to draw on people. I still want to like make cool shit happen. And so I just started freehanding on people exclusively. I've done it before, but not exclusively, where I don't have any other way of doing things. I always had that backup, and now I didn't have that for a while. And now I feel really good about that. I don't think I really need that anymore unless I do something that I haven't done before, where I really want to be like, all right, we have 4 days. I would love that second guess, right? I would love to see how this looks, and I want to be able to like just see this in color, and then I can make a color study really quick, right? So that's great when you have digital. That's what it's really good for. And some people really need to see what's happening, and then you can do like a little mock-up of what's going to happen really quickly. But yeah, usually no, I'm just freehanding everything.
That's
and
cool. I didn't realize that's how you transitioned into strictly freehand, because you just literally did not have your stuff.
I tend to make myself do things that I don't want to do, like trying to make like future Marcus do things that past Marcus really didn't want to do. And then past Marcus has power over future Marcus by, like we are not buying that chocolate. So that's not in the house when I want it, like that kind of technique. And that kind of works for me to make me be a little bit more diligent about the things that I want.
It's good advice. There'll probably be a lot of young tattooers listening to this show, and I think that's great advice. You got to keep pushing yourself. Don't get comfortable. That's not a good place to be if you want to make it to the top of anything. Yeah. If you want to be at the top of the food chain, get ready to be basically uncomfortable your entire career. We all want to believe. And even now, 30 years, I still find myself with the beads of sweat on my nose going, is this working? The idea of getting to a place where it's just a breeze. Yeah. I haven't found it. And
it's not a good place to be. I mean, that's what I found. It's like when you get too much praise, right? When you get too comfortable, that's usually when things start declining, on your personal stock market of ideas, right? And quality, like when you get too comfortable and you think too highly of yourself, that creeps up on you. You don't really even realize that, but then like your work starts declining and you don't realize that, but everybody else does, right?
True.
And then if you have a good technique to keep yourself real, and by no means I say that I have the perfect technique for that, because I'm still learning who I am too, right? And so, there's still stuff that I need to do in order to like keep myself at that level. But, we're also competing with people who are 20 years younger than us, and we want to be in this game for a little bit longer. Yeah. And, that's also a fair amount of pressure right there, which I love, by the way. That's really good stuff.
Yeah,
right?
Keeps you motivated.
Oh yeah.
I was going to ask you what would be your advice to the younger tattooers out there, but I think you might have just answered that question.
Just be honest.
Yeah.
Just to be honest, like with yourself as much as you can. I think if you take anything away from it, to just try to know who you are and just be honest about that. Don't lie to yourself. You can lie to everybody else if that's who you want to be, but don't lie to yourself. And then just be honest about it, because otherwise you have no chance on actually like making yourself into what you want to be, because nobody is good enough ever. Nobody's good enough just the way you're made. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you have to be able to work on yourself. And I think like for me personally, like setting traps for myself is a really good way of doing that, because otherwise I outsmart myself, and I can't really like have like tomorrow we're gonna do this, and then I'm like maybe not, right? It's like, what is past Marcus gonna do about this today? He's not here anymore, right? So I can do whatever I want. I really don't like authority.
Neither do I.
Right?
That's why we're tattooers.
That's why we're tattooers.
Well, and on that note of honesty, I think that's great advice, by the way, and especially poignant right now. And I'll say why. Okay, we find ourselves in a time as artists where we can open up our phones and get inspired by the entire planet every morning,
Right.
and so I think it's getting more and more difficult for people to remain honest. And really, that's a hard thing, to look at great tattoos every day and not let them inform you too much to where your voice disappears. And suddenly you're just unconsciously reproducing other people's work, even though it's not tracing it. Mm-hmm. You just start sounding like them, almost, advice I'm starting to give myself. And I'm just coming up with this lately. Like, I'm just trying not to look at other people's work as much, because I've accidentally imitated stuff, and I don't even know I'm doing it. I'm just like drawing stuff that I think is cool, and then I realize after I've drawn it, well, that's a lot like what's his name stuff that I'm so inspired by.
100%.
So that's good advice.
Yeah, and that happens to everybody. Mm-hmm. And then some people just are a little bit more self-aware, and then some people are not. But I think that's really like, we're all visual people in tattooing. I mean, that's how you get into tattooing. Like, every tattoo has to look good first, and then has to make sense second or third, or not at all. But it has to look good, right? We're not really like all artists. I think we're way more designers than that we're artists in the end of the day, because things have to look good. And so, of course, your eyes going everywhere all the time, and you just have to ask yourself, okay, who am I going to allow myself to take really notes on? Is it other tattooers? Like, I have this priority system that my seminars are about, right? But I have this priority system with everything. So I have a technique for that kind of stuff. And there's priorities in how I grade my references that I steal from, because that's what we're doing, right? So, like other tattoo artists in BioMech. No, that's a big no-no. I can't really look at that kind of stuff, right? So other tattoo artists, sure. If it's a different genre, sure, yes. I can look at that stuff and take notes, but I'm going to be really careful, and I'm going to spread that out. And then you have non-tattoo artists, like other artists, other media in BioMech, and then other genres. Okay, yeah. And then you go into like the real world, right? Like sculpture, architecture, whatever that is not two-dimensional. Then you go into 3 dimensions, and you're like, okay, you have artists that make that kind of stuff. Okay, that's fair game. That's really cool stuff. I can really get inspired by that. And then you have photography, the natural world. You're looking at nature, and then God becomes the artist, right? Mm-hmm. And then I feel like I can steal from God as much as I want to. I can try to fake that guy's signature all day. And so
that's a cool system. I like that.
That's how So that's how I make sense, because I like to make sense of because I have to teach it. If I want to be able to teach it, I have to be able to explain how I do it. And then I have to come up with a system, right? And so this whole priority system, I use that for almost everything I do. But when it comes to reference, it's actually a really good way to keep yourself real enough to develop your own bespoke, like handwriting and tattooing is what everybody wants to have a recognizable style, right? And you can't get a recognizable style if you let yourself steal from people who are too close to you, to who you want to be, right? Like the further away you get on that priority scale, the more you will do something that's really surprising, you know? And then it just becomes a game of like, how can you explain this being suitable for this over here?
That's so true.
And, you know, that worked for me, you know, but that's all kind of like post hoc rationalization of where I found myself, right? Like back then when I was really struggling with my BioMech, a lot of people, it was because I was on the Reed Street and then the Tattoodles forum later, where everybody was on before there was like a MySpace and the Facebook and all that kind of stuff, right? And we were all communicating with each other. And this whole idea of like biting somebody's style, biggest no-no in tattooing. I didn't want to be one of the guys who did that, right? And so I became really self-conscious about, man, I've been taking a lot of notes from Guy and Aaron. Holy shit, like I can't be doing that. So you fall into this whole, it's like, oh, what else am I going to do? Especially with something like BioMech, where else are you going to look?
What do you give
Because that shit doesn't exist.
Well, I think nature.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Icicles and on that, hearing I'm actually learning a lot today. This has been good for me. I feel like I'm in your seminar. But the other day I was struggling. This is a good, just like a direct example. I wanted a different. I'm like, I keep using the same color palette. I'm like, I got it, and I suddenly realized I started looking up minerals on Google. It's just rocks that are, and man, I found like 3 new color combinations I never would have considered. Like this blood red with this teal green, where it's just this weird lava rock, but then there's some other kind of mineral drifting through it, and those 2 colors are gorgeous together. And I'm like, so. Again, it's like I could have went online and looked at a bunch of Instagram pages with other artists who do great color work and gotten a color study from one of them. But it was so much more unique just to start looking at nature and what nature's doing.
Isn't that feeling so much better too? Than you don't feel like you're stealing something when you're in nature, right? You feel like you turned over a rock and there was like a little treasure underneath a rock, you know? And then you really find like you discovered something. You're not stealing, you're discovering. Right. And that's so much better, because then you feel like you've been on a journey and that you've been rewarded with a discovery, and that makes the journey an adventure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then you feel like, oh man, like I can take this home. It's like you're going on a trip and you take this impression back home with you. And that feels like the most natural thing in the world, you know?
And you're going to feel much more proud of yourself, much more when you look in the mirror and knowing how authentic your creative process is.
Much more personal.
Yeah. It's going to be much more rewarding. Yeah. And you're more apt to come up with something new. Like we started this discussion with H.R. Geiger, who came up with something new that no one had ever seen before. Well, you're not going to probably come up with something brand new if you're just referencing other tattoo artists. Oh, yeah. But you might come up with something new if you're in a cave and you're looking at stalagmites. You might see something in their shape and in their form, and you got your phone on, you take a picture of that thing and take it home and put it in your iPad and study it. And whoa, this could be this could make its way into my tattooing. And this sort of leads us to somewhere I wanted to go. And I feel like I'm doing this too much, but I can't help myself because of this talk around authenticity with artists, to this whole AI movement. And I kind of wanted to breach into that a little bit, because and maybe some of you haven't listened to some of my previous episodes because I brought this up before, but we are entering a place where you can basically take 25 pictures of someone else's art, feed it into an AI machine, it'll spin it around and spit out something new, but a lot like the stuff you fed into it. And like it or not, and I might be wrong, but I'm sure I won't be, there are going to be many, many artists, not just tattoo artists, but all types of artists that are going to be doing this. And I think it's, will they be successful? Some of them probably will be, but I don't think this discussion is who will make it, who's going to be financially successful, because I don't know. Some people using AI probably will be, and some people who are just doing it by looking at rocks while they're on a hike might. But who in those 2 groups is going to look in the mirror and have a fulfilled artistic life? I would say the second. So, I mean, I'm kind of, I guess, saying to everybody out there, like, you can do that. And they're gonna, trust me, dude, they're gonna, these younger tattooers, there's gonna be a whole group that are gonna generate all their creative part of their process out of AI. And then they're just going to take it to work. And then they're a technician and they just tattoo the thing they've already made on a computer. So I'm not saying bad or good. I'm just saying what you've highlighted is for personal fulfillment and being able to look in the mirror and know you were authentic and honest about your expression artistically. I think it's a better route to go.
It's worthwhile, right? And I think you don't feel it so much when you're in your 20s, right? You don't feel the pressure to do it that way so much at that point. Most people don't. But I think the older you get, you learn that you die one day and that nobody gets to dodge that bullet. And you want to be happy with yourself, right? You want to be, you don't want to go to a place where you feel like, okay, if that movie like plays for the last time, you know, you go down that tunnel, I want that movie to be nice. You know, I want that to be a happy ending. And I think about that a lot, you know, it's like, and probably it's because, you know, like you have like one or two like really good psychedelic experiences and it teaches you a little bit about how important that is. But when it comes to AI, I have really conflicting thoughts about that. One of them is, and I'm just making these thoughts right now because it's so new. Yeah. And so I'm like, you know, you either go out in nature or you don't even have to go out in nature. You can you can do that in a city too. And you just pay attention, right? To what's around you visually. And you'll pick something, you know, like a color scheme, like you said, for example, like an interesting color scheme. You can go down the beach and find a dead crab and you have a perfect color scheme, right? Or you find a cool car, you know, that has a color where you're like, oh, I didn't think that was a color that I was going to like, but this works, right? That can happen anywhere. And so I feel like as we spend more time on our screens and our devices, we want to create a place where we can have these kinds of surprises, you know? And the only way that you can surprise yourself and the only way that you can steal from nature, right? Like I said before, like the only thing to really steal from with a clear conscience is from God, from nature. And so AI is a little bit like that, right? So if you give that thing enough information at some point, this is in the baby steps right now. So at some point, it's going to be this thing that is just equivalent to the natural world, making things that we've never seen before, making things that nobody's ever seen before that are completely novel and alien. Some of them absolutely gruesome and ugly and dark, and some of them are going to be absolutely beautiful, right? It's like you put all this imagery. I like what you're doing
here. I haven't thought of it this way.
I have to think. I have a lot of dark thoughts. We can do that too.
I like this positive thing where you're going here, though.
Okay,
this is cool.
Like, let's do positive first and then bring it way down. So that's the positive part, right? So it gives people, and people don't have to go out in nature anymore for that then. You know, you can do that on this little rectangle. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I'm also 43, right? I think that we make way better memories if we can use all of our senses, like smell, touch, our eyes, our ears, you know, and everything else that you might believe exists. You go out in nature, you pick up, I did that yesterday. I picked up a palm frond because they're everywhere here, right? Picked it apart, smelled it, hold it up to the light, see how the light interacts with it, you know, and like picked it apart, tried to break it, see how strong of a material that is. And I looked at it from every angle, didn't take a single photo. I know exactly how those things work now, and I can use them. I can make something look like that. I know what kind of colors are in there. I know what it smells like. And that's in there now because I recorded it with sound, smell, touch, and my eyes. And you just can't do that with a phone. You just can't, right? And it's a completely different experience. Sure, you can reference on your phone or on a bigger screen, whatever. You know, you can see something that is really, really cool. But it's not really an experience. It's more, then it's really just a reference that you refer to. But when you've experienced something like a material or a texture or a color, you know, like just holding up a leaf and holding it up to the light and see how the color changes when you reflect the light as where you refract it through the leaf, right? Color changes completely. And you learn that, okay, a leaf doesn't necessarily have a color. It's how it interacts with the light that makes it And then you can tattoo like that. You can have like some leaves that are like a pale green with like a little bit of blue because it reflects the color of the sky. And then you have a couple of leaves that are turned this way, and they will not reflect the color of the sky. They will filter the color of the sun all of a sudden. You can give those, and then you can make, let's say, something as simple as a sleeve with sakuras, with like cherry blossoms. All of a sudden you can say like, oh yeah, you know what? I get to get away with like 2 very different colors of green that I'm going to put out in my tattoo because I saw that happen, and that makes perfect sense. Right? And so all of a sudden you have that. It's just but yeah, making experiences is going to be really, really hard unless, you go into this whole VR experience. And we are going to try and make that happen digitally. I'm absolutely sure of it. People are going to try to create smell and touch and visual and audio. All of that stuff is going to be easy at some point. And it's going to be an experience that is going to be like taking acid, just reproducible, explainable. You can show it to others. That sounds amazing. I feel like we're coddling ourselves a little bit by making all that kind of stuff available to us. I don't know if we're going to be like, oh man, maybe it's a little bit much. It's not for me to say. I'm getting old, But so that's the positive part. Mm-hmm. The negative part is that I think art is going to be dead within 10 years.
Well, I know why you would say that, because of what these machines will be able to do. But there is an aspect you're making me think about, like, if you have a really honest artist, a really authentic artist, a guy that's doing all the things you've already talked about, and he's putting on HR goggles, and is that what they're called? VR. HR. I am 51 years old, everybody.
I've had HR goggles on my whole life.
And he puts on his VR goggles and he gets to have that experience too. Now he's bringing things from that world with the fact he was at the beach looking at the crab, and you're fusing them all together. Isn't there the opportunity for just another level to occur? Mm-hmm. It's one more novel thing that's informing our creative process. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to experiment with this just for the pure sake of, I don't know what will happen.
Sure.
But I'm going to be doing a bodysuit show this year with my shop. We haven't done one in a few years, and I'm going to paint a couple bodysuits. And one of them, I'm going to use AI to start generating novel ideas. And then I'm not going to copy those AI productions, but I'm going to use them and manipulate them. And I'm going to do something with that. And then I'm going to not do it that way. And I'm going to do it my old fashioned way, just for an experiment.
Yeah.
I mean,
that sounds really exciting.
It does, and interesting, and why not? I'm not here to impress at this point, 30 years. I'm just going to fuck around and do what I want and have a good time. And that seems entertaining to me and just novel, just to kind of explore this new frontier that's coming our way. But art is dead, you had said.
I don't need to extrapolate on that, because I had just an interesting idea about this as you were speaking. So what if... So because here's the thing, we're getting a little bit older, and we've said this often enough now. So this is the last time I'm going to say it. But at some point, it gets harder and harder and harder to surprise yourself, right? Because you make big strides and then you hit a plateau for a while. And then you're like, okay, things are getting better. You hit a plateau again, and you hit a plateau again. And these plateaus are getting longer the older you get, right? What if you could feed all of your own stuff into an AI and see what would happen with your art, like put in 20 years, like what would happen? What would I do if I had another 20 years? Right?
Interesting.
And then you take that right away. Maybe you can skip 20 years and just get to the next step without looking at everybody else's stuff. But you just like, okay, I put all of my art in here, and then add some of my favorite references, stuff that I look at all the time, put that in there, and let's just let the computer or the AI generate what my brain might need 20 years of like work. Let's just let this AI figure out what I may be doing. And so you can basically steal from your future self in a way. That's something I'm really excited about.
Did you just come up with that?
Yeah.
That's pretty dope. I hadn't. That's another.
I'm just looking for positive things that come out of that, because it's not like we can do anything to stop it. This is going to happen.
I mean, think about it. That's a fantastic. I never thought of that way. If you're a musician and you could just put not even all your work, like your 30 favorite songs you ever wrote, and let it spit out 20. And you don't even have to steal those. You could just be like,
those are yours.
In those 20 it spits out, you could be like, wow, that riff right there that's it. I'm taking that riff and now I'm going to take what I already know naturally, intuitively, and I'm going to mix those together. I guess.
So do you think this is going to become like self-aware and is going to bite us in the asses? Like, listen, motherfucker, I gave you that and you just took it and just said, this is all my stuff.
Well, there is a lot of copyright infringement, legal issues coming already because the people that own the AI computers that do this, they're trying to figure out, well, what out of your work, what do we own? You know, if you're a video game maker and you're using AI to come up with new types of goblins and stuff, and then you put out a video game and make billions of dollars, well,
really easy to do too.
Right. What cut do they get?
No artist wants to deal with that kind of stuff, right? No artist wants to deal with paperwork, lawyers, copyright stuff. You know, none of us want to really deal with that. We want to make art and we want to stay children. Right? We don't want to grow up. And so this kind of stuff, now all of a sudden there's a lawyer comes like, what are you doing with that? As long as you're just tattooing, you're probably fine.
Yeah, but if you put it in a movie or something, or if you put out an album and it's it's the next biggest hit,
all of a sudden everybody wants your money.
Yeah.
That's
a real thing.
And that might be the thing that actually slows that thing way down. Might be money, might be copyright infringement, might be the market. You know, the market brings that stuff into our life. The market taketh away. So.
I mean, if it's making something fantastic that the world loves, there's probably enough money for the AI generator and enough for the people that produced, and everyone gets their share, and on the production goes.
I don't know. I feel like the older I get, the more conservative I get too, which is also probably a pretty natural thing to happen, right? Like you're progressive, then you reach all your goals, and then you want to conserve them, right? So and get conservative, and you know that's a good way to be. In some ways, it's a bad way to be in other ways, but I feel like when you make all that kind of stuff happen, I feel like I want to have a brake pedal on some of these things too, right? I feel like we both have kids, you know, you see like how addicted they get to screens and how quickly that happens and how adept they are to work with these things, but how also it makes their world so much smaller in many ways that we understand, that they might never be able to understand, right? I don't feel like the natural world has given us by far everything that there is on offer. Right. And so here we are getting ready to close that window and close that door and just like going into this world that is so much more exciting that is just like in this like little rectangle. And I'm a little bit conservative about that. I want there to be a way that slows that down. I don't get into a car that doesn't have brakes. You might
want that, but you're not going to get it.
I'm a mountain biker. I only have brakes on my thing. And then the world makes me go downhill.
Right.
You know, but I don't want to be in a car that only has a gas pedal and not a single brake.
But you are in that car and
I know.
There's no stopping it.
Exactly. And so I'm trying to also come up with ways that this is a positive thing that happens, but I also need to come up with ways for myself where I believe like there is like some kind of power in the world that will slow this down naturally. We will run into some kind of wall with this, hopefully, because if we're not,
we all die.
No, we're not 100%. 100%. We're all going to be dying. No, but that might be too much too fast, you know? And
I think it already is too much too fast.
I think so too.
And it doesn't seem to be slowing down. And I'm with you. And it's way out of my control. The people inventing these things and building these things, I don't know any of them. I have no power over slowing any of them down. As long as they're making money and making progress, I don't see it stopping. And we as organic humans have to navigate that as healthily as possible and manage it. It's like the world invented a new drug and it makes you feel awesome, but it has some negative side effects. You have to be able to look at that and be like, well, I'm only going to do it once a month then, and not just be like, why not? And just do it every day. I do think it was like, I look at my own children and I wonder if they're because creativity is like a muscle, and it's like anything. If you use it, it gets stronger, and the ability to come up with a novel idea or anything like this becomes easier. People say to me all the time, I'll just sit down and draw some surrealistic thing. Like, how do you do that? Where do you come up with that? And I'm like, well, I've been doing it for 30 years. It's not that hard. No. But when they're on their phones and have a computer that's creating novel ideas for them, what happens to that muscle, that human creative muscle? It atrophies, right? And so I wonder if the real people that crush it in the next 20 years are the ones who are smart enough to not digest too much of it, to keep that part of their brain stronger.
It's really interesting. I like that.
It'd be like being a mathematician and saying, okay, well, I have an iPhone. I don't need to know math anymore. I'll just use my calculator. Well, how about the guy that goes, yeah, I have a calculator too, but I still am going to write down and I'm going to do it on paper as well.
I'm still going to work out.
I'm still going to work out.
Yeah.
And I think we are entering a world where I think the generation coming up, a lot of them aren't working out. They're just leaning on this technology for so much. And so the folks that, I think there'll be, parents that'll teach their children that, you want to still use this. I mean, we can go on and on. It's just a fascinating subject.
It's a fascinating thing. I think it's going to be like it always has been, people are going to get older. As they reach a certain age, they're going to make a couple of realizations and it's going to lead to them doing things differently. It's easy to lose hope when you look at people who are between 15 and 25, maybe 30, and then being like, oh my God, where are we going? But once you get to know people that are past that barrier, usually people realize oh, holy shit, I'm going to die one day. Things I got to change, and then people make different choices. And I think that's as old as time. Yeah. And that has always been like that. So I do have faith in everybody's personal, agency, with the kind of choices that they're making. And at some point, it's not going to matter to me anymore too. Yeah. I have, this is not the only thing that I'm doing that I'm stoked on doing, right? There's many other things that I really like to do with my life to be really excited about. And, if BioMech or tattooing altogether goes the life of the dodo, I'm going to be all right, but I saw some really amazing things in my life. And, we is going to be the next thing. So, and that's okay with me too. So you just have to keep your life exciting for yourself, and how anybody does that, that's completely up to them. I like real things in the real world. I do.
You like reality. You don't want to. Yeah. You don't want to put on VR goggles and mountain bike.
I have never.
You want to go get on a mountain bike.
Yeah. I want to go on a mountain bike. I've never had VR goggles on my head yet, and I used to be I used to be in love with technology until I felt oh, things are starting to get away from me a little bit. Like I said, I started with this whole digital thing, and I feel like I was one of the first people who did this in tattooing, to a point where I didn't need paper anymore. And nowadays I don't like drawing or painting. I never draw, I never paint anymore. I never do. You were talking about exercising that muscle. I almost never do it. I do it with the people that I want to spend that time with when I freehand on them, but I don't really draw in my free time or paint in my free time anymore. It's and maybe that comes at some point where I feel like I have that back, but that left me at some point, I think probably moving to other countries is hard. Right. And so I think the first time I moved to the Netherlands, and then I moved back to Germany. And that's probably around the time when I lost that, because I felt okay, there's so much going on in my life. Something has got to give. And I think that's when I probably stopped drawing and painting, because I just got too frustrated with it all the time. And
part of it too, when you're a tattoo artist and you're spending your workday creating art, because I've done the same thing. I still draw, I still paint, but not nearly at this pace I used to, only because I'm striking a balance. Gosh, can I do something else today besides art?
Yeah.
Can I go ride I like the mountain bike too. And, anything, just go for a walk. You're looking for other outlets to experience this beautiful world we're in besides that one, specific lane. Balance, right? Yeah,
I feel like you have to, you can develop yourself as an artist and you can become an amazing artist. But once you are an amazing artist, have you also done some personal development in the meantime, right? And then if you arrive at 40, 45 and you feel like, oh, I feel like I'm still 20 because I haven't really done anything but just like tattooing and art and tattooing and art and tattooing and art. Then at some point you're like, maybe there's like space for some other stuff here that like makes me grow as a person that I might want to like, like growing up a little bit, maybe start a family and, like all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's also really important not to forget, I've done quite a bit of personal mentoring lately. Because I had downtime tattooing because I just moved to another country and I can't really work yet legally, right? So I have to wait until my whole immigration stuff is round. And then until then, I do more like personal mentorship online. And I heard this story over and over and over. I've been tattooing for 10 years and I've plateaued out and I haven't developed my own style and I don't know what to do. And I feel really depressed. And like we talk about this kind of stuff for a couple of sessions, and usually what comes out is like, dude, you need to take a break. You need to take a personal break, like do some other stuff, like get out there. If you haven't seen anything else but tattooing, where's the inspiration going to come from? Where's the excitement going to come from? You're fucking burned out. Yeah.
Not that complicated.
No, it's really not, but it's hard to see that when you're that close to it, right?
Well, the idea is if I work hard, if I work harder at it, I'll have my breakthrough. But really sometimes walking away is when you have your breakthrough.
Yeah, some doors open outwards, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that. I use travel and psychedelics and other different things in my life to do that.
How often do you still do psychedelics at this point?
It's funny. I had this is about maybe 8 months ago. I had my first terrifying trip, maybe of my life. I was playing around with some DMT by myself in the backyard, and I don't know, the entities on the other side slapped me down. Yeah. And so I've been a little cautious lately. I'm still a little.
Were you just going into it too easily?
Yes.
We're just getting used to it.
Super cavalier.
Yeah.
I actually had a couple whiskeys. I was like, I'm going to rip this thing and go meet God.
Yeah.
And
God is like, how dare you?
Yes. That's the message. It was real clear. They were just like, do not disrespect this place like that.
It really is humbling.
I didn't think I was coming. It's one of those typical trips where I thought I'd snapped a wire and the world was forever going to be made of plastic, including me. And everything had a smiley face on it. And it was like saying to me, like, how you like it now? The trees were plastic. And it was kind of saying like, you're taking for granted the texture and beauty of the natural reality that you are already in. You're already in the most beautiful thing you will probably, it's so reality that we're in right now is so gorgeous. Yeah. And you're going to come over here looking for something bigger and better. Like we're going to just I turned everything into plastic. And I mean, I felt like 20 minutes, maybe it felt like 2 days, but it was probably 20 minutes. And I just remember almost on my knees begging for everything to turn back to normal. And it did. And I took that, and it was still really a positive because I've since then felt I take more time when I walk by trees, when I look at my wife's hand and when I just feel the texture of clothing. I'm like, oh, this is nice. Like just feel the wood of this table. Yeah. This is a stone trip. I mean, look around. Why do we need to trip out? This is pretty trippy. Yeah. This room we're in, you sitting there talking to me. So it was a cool lesson. But I would say to answer your question, only when that was a little bit of a me fucking around. I probably shouldn't.
And you feel like you need an adjustment or something like that.
I just wait for those moments to show up.
Yeah.
And that when it's like you're at the right place, the right time. You're like, this feels good. Then So I'll probably go back to something.
I haven't done this until I was 40. I've always I was always super afraid about like giving control away. I was always I always felt like, oh, I'm so self-aware. I can do all these things myself. I know exactly who I am, blah, 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 bullshit. And then when I was 40, like COVID, right? COVID hit. And I was just coming back from a trip with my now good friend, Guy, Atchison. And we were hanging out. And Guy has been trying to get me to go on an experience, for, I don't know, as long as I know him, almost 15 years. He's like, Marcus, I really need to know what you see. And I was like, I'm good. every time. And then at one time I was down there and I really felt like, you know what, like it's absolutely time. Like something else needs to happen. Like I'm bored of myself. Like there's something else in here that I'm not going to find. Like I can keep, I always like to see like doors in my mind, and I can try to jimmy this lock for another 20 years, like filing things and trying to make the right key for this lock. Or I can like get just like this general skeleton key that just fits in every door and just open them all and then just see what's coming out. That's how it's been explained to me. I don't know what I'm talking about at this point.
It's a good analogy.
Never taken any mushrooms, never taken any LSD, none of that stuff. Never really like even like an edible, to that point. So I haven't really explored myself really that much. And then he gave me some DMT, like as my first experience. And I didn't really know how to do it and didn't really know how to smoke it, but like had a good experience, was positive, was really interesting. It wasn't like a crazy thing that I can't explain. Things just started to change visually, and I closed my eyes and was gone. I was like, this was super, super interesting. I'm going to let this sit for a little bit. And I went home and I started to make my own DMT because I didn't have a supply or whatever. So I just went online and just figured out how to make it chemically, pretty much. And I made some. And then I just slowly like got myself to a point where I'm like, okay, now I can take like a bigger hit. And that's when I blew my own mind, basically. And it's all by myself. Like I was completely alone. It was like right the first year COVID hit and you're like isolated at home all by yourself. It was me and my dog hanging out with each other. And I was like, man, I remember the first time I smoked something and you get like this super warm feeling, love, 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 right? And I opened my eyes for the first time and I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And, you look around and everything looks completely different. Like my first hallucinogenic experience, I was like, okay, this is nuts. And I was hooked. And then I did it too much. And then I got a slap in the face, just like you said. And I felt like I got like squished between two rocks, and like one of my eyes was here and one was there, and I got like squished. It's like, how dare you? I got just smeared between these like two slabs of rock. It was very unpleasant. Yeah, you don't want to go into that stuff haphazardly, but as long as I had respect for it, was pretty amazing.
Well, and the good news is it's very safe.
It is very safe.
You're not. It's not going to hurt you. I mean, I shouldn't speak like that. I'm not a doctor, but I can only speak anecdotally. I have yet to, and I know hundreds of people who have done it, and I've never had anyone that was,
I guess if you have like instances in your family of like mental illness or like schizophrenia or something, you should probably be really careful. Or if you're taking any like SSRIs or anything like that, you can get like dopamine syndrome or something like that. You should be.
I have heard that. Yeah. That's true.
So,
but for healthy, adjusted people, it's pretty friendly stuff. And
if you have a bad experience, it's probably really good for you too. You probably
like I said that one. I call it my bad trip, but I'm really kind of should probably call it my best trip.
Yeah. So I was just going to say that it's probably the one that actually gave you exactly what you needed, right?
Yeah.
And then you don't need it anymore, right? And for a while, you're like, okay, I think I'm good now, and then you get to experience yourself with
a new perspective.
Yeah, a new perspective. Yeah, isn't that really something?
Well,
I'm glad I did it so late in life.
It's always the perfect time. When it goes, it is the perfect time.
Glad I did it so late, because I feel like if I would have done it younger, it would have been a very, very different thing, and I might have had like a really bad experience and then not experience it again when you can actually do something with it.
Yeah.
When you actually
you'd be turned off at a young age and then never get the opportunity again.
Because you hear that a lot.
Yeah, it's true. Like, oh, I did that shit my senior year. I'll never touch it again. It's like, yeah, you were at a party and someone gave you some acid and you had a bad time. And now the whole genre of plant medicine is, off limits to you. Yeah, that's true. I was lucky enough to accidentally have a lot of good experiences when I was young, even though the intention wasn't for that. The intention was to like, hey, let's do this stuff at a party. And next thing you know, I'm walking around in the desert, communing with nature, and everyone's like, "Where'd Aaron go?" So I got lucky. Nice. But yeah, that's an interesting subject. I just say to people, you decide. The research is out there. Anyone can get all the information they want about it. And the biggest one we desire. Like if you were really feeling the urge, that's usually what I tell people, then do it. It's relatively safe to do.
Yeah.
And if you're really feeling like, fuck no, then I guess don't. You
No,
might not
yeah,
be in the place
right?
in your life where that's the appropriate thing to be doing.
Yeah. I was pretty desperate at that point, right? I felt like something's got to give. Like I don't know how to change any of this. Like I wasn't in a good spot. And so I was like, all right, I guess I gotta have to learn how to surrender.
That's the biggest lesson it teaches, isn't it?
Yeah.
You got to let go of that ego and let go of all the control you think you have, which is a beautiful lesson because you get it back, but you have a different reverence towards it after that experience.
Learn to appreciate yourself a little bit more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, coming a little bit full circle here, your authentic way you approach tattooing, I really appreciate that. Your process, how you interact with your clients, how you like to very carefully gauge where you gather your reference material to keep you more authentic and not just echoing the voices of other artists. We're going to get a little into that today because I have asked you for the honor of being tattooed by you, and you have accepted that request.
I have.
And so I don't know if we need to talk about it much. I grew up in Iowa. I love memories from my childhood. It's as I've become a grown adult, had children, opened businesses, the hardest thing I struggle for is finding that little boy in there. The one who just wants to go literally play hide and seek with my daughter in the backyard and actually enjoy playing hide and seek with a 12-year-old. You know, it's harder and harder to, why do I want to just sit on my lawn furniture while she plays hide and seek?
Yeah.
Like what happened to that little boy, you know? And so I like to get tattoos that remind me of my childhood. And I had a really good childhood growing up in Iowa, just pure nature. That's where we lived. We left the house in the morning and we were in the woods or cornfield. It was just all nature. But in Iowa, there are every so many years, these huge swarms of cicadas would infiltrate our entire neighborhood and make this incredible sound, just wow, wow. And I can just remember running around catching lightning bugs and that sound, wow, wow, picking them off trees. They would emerge from these little bioskeletons and then the real insect would emerge. And I remember picking up those little things and talk about H.R. Geiger. It looks like where Geiger might have gotten his inspiration. So anyway, that's kind of my meaning for this tattoo is just, I asked you to maybe do a cicada, but to me, your art style is so organic and reflective of nature. I'm like, this would be the perfect guy to do an insect of all things.
Yeah.
So
I love doing insects.
So we're just, what's your plan today? You're just going to get a Sharpie out and rip it?
Yeah. I looked at a lot of, the way that I like to do it usually is like, I look at all of the reference and try to internalize as much of it as possible. And then I hope for an idea to come up, like sleep on it. And then sometimes I have an idea in the morning. So that's what we're going to go with. And then I just try to draw most of it to the spot where we're going to do it, which I think was like the side of your knee or something, like
kind of above to the right of the knee.
Just above on your thigh. And so we're just going to doodle a little bit, see what happens. As soon as something good happens, I'm going to finalize that. Going to look at some reference just to make sure we get that thing right, and then we can rip.
I love this. I love this because I didn't realize when you were going to tattoo. I knew I was going to get a really cool tattoo in your style, but I get to be a part of this process, the way you do it. Like I said, this is kind of not many guys I've come across in the industry do it this way. So I get to be an intimate part of this process with you today. Yeah. And I think knowing how you like to have that little before the tattoo part, we just did it. Yeah. We did it on film.
Perfect.
All right,
I'm excited.
I am too. So that's it for now, you guys. Stay tuned. We're going to be on the other side of the room in a minute, figuring out a cicada tattoo.
Perfect.
All right, brother.
Oh.
What is this tattoo?
It is a cicada. I grew up in Iowa and they would infest our cornfields every 5 years or so, and I'll never forget it. The sound they would make and all that. So this is kind of my Iowa leg.
So you don't need a grip that clicks.
I do a lot like this. It's on the side of the knee, on the tendon. It's got a little fiery tone to it, but I feel pretty good. No, it's fine, but it does. You know that area. It's a little bite.
I've been 6 more times.
Yeah. He's got a devilish look on his face.
I saw that look. How's it going down there?
Pretty good.
Feeling good about this?
Oh yeah, I feel great.
Wow, everybody, welcome back. What can I say here? I just got one of the raddest tattoos in my life from a person who's now I consider a great friend.
Yes.
This experience together today and everything we talked about, the tattoo. We talked about this earlier in the podcast. Like, it's not just that you're getting a tattoo. You're embedding your body with the human who does it and the experience that happens around it. And I think today is just a perfect example of how awesome that can be. There won't be a day that goes by that I don't look at that cicada and just smile. And I'll think of you and I'll think of our fun time on the show. So I want to honor you and cheers to you for being that today. But really to everyone listening, remember that, like, make your tattoo experience with somebody worth making it with, would be probably the toast I'm making.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It was a really good experience. I'm glad I came out here. What a great place to be.
Well, cheers, my friend. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. As we end today's affairs, well, I don't know. Where can people find you?
At the moment, I'm on Vancouver Island in Canada, in BC. Still West Coast, still considered the West Coast, all the way up there. Absolutely lovely. At the moment, we're still establishing everything. And I think by this time next year, I should be completely up and running. But I encourage everybody to reach out and get in touch with me if they're interested in getting tattoo work done by me. And we can set something up for the really near future. So,
and let me just add,
yes,
on Instagram at Luxaltera, which is Luxaltera, right? We'll have links in the show notes and all that. But that's a great way of course, to see your work and get in touch with you.
Absolutely.
And yeah, if anybody listening wants to get a BioMech-esque tattoo from a very, very rad individual, I encourage you to look this man up because he's 30 years, one of the best I've met. So thank you again.
Thanks,
man. And hopefully this isn't our last little get together.
No, I hope so. I hope we see each other again soon.
All right, buddy. Cheers.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Thank you for tuning in. Please go to YouTube, give us a follow, or subscription, they call it, or make some comments to me. Let me know what you like, what you don't like. Go to Apple Music, go to Spotify, give me a like, give me a follow. We appreciate all of it. And we'll see you on the next episode.
I might add.
Let's do it.
If anybody has any questions for me personally, I'll be monitoring the YouTube comments. And if you guys have any questions, like in the first couple of days that this has been aired, I'm happy to try my best to answer all of those questions too.
Now that you said that too, I think we should throw out to the audience the fact that you are doing mentorships.
Yes. Yes, I do.
Yes, for tattoo artists.
Yes, I do. I'm pretty booked up with those, to be quite honest, but I'm always open to have people come to me with any of their problems, anything that people struggle with. If they think that I can help them with anything, please reach out. I'm super happy to do anything I can to come up with creative solutions.
That's
yes,
cool.
For sure.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Right on, man. Well, you guys reach out. Find this man, check it out, check out what he does, see his art. And when this is healed up, I'll give you guys a sneak peek of the final product.